Hi, my name is Sage, and you're listening to Ink Inc. This is episode 1 of a 5-part series on tattoos. Today, we're sketching out the foundations of tattoos. Where did they start? What's the history? All of that will be covered in today's episode of Ink Inc. with me, Sage. A lot of us get tattoos but never question the facts. Where did tattoos originate from? The answer to that is muddled, as there aren't any clear traces to a direct source.
If you go back through history, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a society that didn't have some form of body modification.
That's Dr. David Lane, a sociologist who teaches at the University of South Dakota and teaches a special course about tattoos and its sociology. Cultures all over the world have some form of tattoos, which all have their own history.
Some of the oldest human remains we've ever recovered have had tattoos on them. In fact, are you familiar with Ötzi the Iceman?
Ötzi the Iceman was found in the Alps near the border between Austria and Italy in 1999 by a pair of German tourists taking a hike. Ötzi's around 5,300 years old, the oldest person found to have tattoos.
He's got 56 or 57 tattoos on him, and it's likely that they were for arthritis and medical reasons.
According to the Smithsonian, people originally thought that Ötzi had 56 to 59 tattoos. However, upon closer inspection, Ötzi actually had 61 tattoos on his body. The Iceman's tattoos are thought to be linked to medical practices like acupuncture. Over in Africa, tattoos can be found as far as 5,000 years ago. According to the BBC, a pair of mummies with tattoos were discovered in Egypt last year. The male had illustrations of a wild bull and a Barbary sheep on his upper arm, while the female had S-shaped motifs on her upper arm and shoulder. Daniel Antonet, the British Museum's curator of physical anthropology, stated that the discovery of the 5,000-year-old mummies pushed back the evidence for tattooing in Africa by a millennium. Tattoos in Egypt were interesting. They may have served to function for fertility and rejuvenation. According to the Smithsonian, the tattooing of ancient Egyptian women had a therapeutic role and functioned as a permanent form of amulet during the very difficult time of pregnancy and birth. The pattern of distribution, largely around the abdomen, on top of the thighs and the breasts, support the claim. It would also explain the specific types of designs, in particular the net-like distribution of dots applied over the abdomen. During pregnancy, this specific pattern would expand in a protective fashion in the same way bead nets were placed over wrapped mummies to protect them and keep everything in. Now let's visit Japan.
Tattooing in Japan has a really long history. It can be traced back to 10,000 to 300 BC, actually.
That's Dr. Mieko Yamada, a professor of sociology and doctor of philosophy at Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne. As Dr. Yamada said, tattoos have had a long history, but since there was no writing system except for China's, the oldest Japanese record that can be found is from the 8th century.
The oldest Japanese record in the 8th century mentions 2 types of tattoo. One was for a mark of distinction on a man of very high status, so tattooing was really positively accepted. And the other tattoo was actually used for criminal punishment, so it was really interesting.
So tattoos had both a positive connotation and negative connotation.
So the development of Japanese tattooing started in the Edo period, which refers to the time period between the 17th century and the 19th century. Then tattooing was actually well developed, and also during the time period, tattooing was really used for several purposes.
This was also influenced by Chinese culture.
Yes, because of the Confucianism.
Confucianism is a philosophy founded by Chinese philosopher Confucius around 500 BC. It had an influence on Japan.
Tattooing was negatively perceived, and also tattooing was used for criminal punishment. So that's why among common people in those days, tattooing was perceived really negatively. But at the same time, there is a strict hierarchy. And as samurai warrior were the highest, and merchants, farmers are lower class, right? So in those days, merchants and also farmers they were kind of oppressed, economically. So, and only samurai warrior can wear really, good kimono.
The lower class wanted what the samurai had, such as luxurious clothes and tattoos.
So secretly, those common people wanted to get a tattoo. So that their tattoo may show kind of rebellious to the public and also the upper level of the government.
The Yakuza is a famous Japanese gang that originated in the early 17th century. Members were well known for the tattoos they possessed. The tattoos they started out with were marks of their criminal record.
According to my research on literature, the origin of so-called Yakuza or in the Japanese mafia, origin of Japanese mafia were criminal, who had a tattoo, like a criminal, record, right? So in those days, of course, really high technique wasn't really developed, yet. So, they cannot really remove tattoo easily, right? So instead of removing, of course, what they did was just to cover up. So they adapted tattooing, as a custom to, cover up, over their criminal record.
As time passes, tattoos in Japan have become seen a little differently.
I think since 1990s, you can see more visible tattoo popularity of getting tattoo especially among young Japanese. But at the same time, still I witnessed that there's a strong stigma attached to tattoo.
While the Yakuza were active in Japan, Hong Kong was being colonized by England. Dr. David Lane says that during this time, the European elites would visit Hong Kong to get tattooed.
There was a large fad in the late 1800s in the United States of elites being tattooed. But even Winston Churchill was tattooed. His mother was tattooed. Yeah, people forget these things. There were kings that were leaving England, in fact, entire royal families, and traveling to Hong Kong to be tattooed. In a sense, that's a different tattoo than getting it in your hometown, because isn't that representative of your ability in the 1800s to travel the globe and have the resources to do so, to take the time off work and then get tattooed by the same tattooist that your father did? And they were tattooing the royal crest or something like that on you?
In India, the art of tattooing has been practiced for hundreds of years. According to news and entertainment website Accidental Factory, it's impossible to trace it back to a source, and the purpose of tattoos range from beautification to serving as protection from evil spirits. Supposedly in central India, tattoos became tradition to a group of people called Gandhi after a Hindu deity, Lord Shiva, once hosted a feast to which he invited all the other gods. The goddesses were also there, however they were sitting in a different group. A Gone god was present in the event as well. When he went to get his wife, he accidentally mistook her for Parvati, Lord Shiva's wife and the goddess of love and fertility. The Gone god put his arm around Parvati, which enraged her. This caused her to command the tribal woman to wear specific tattoos to differentiate themselves from others. Girls without tattoos were once impure and untouchable. However, as time passed, the practice got more and more rejected. The government banned the tattooing of young girls' faces in the 1970s. Around the same time in America, tattoos had a big breakthrough. Here's Dr. David Lane.
The tattoo renaissance occurred in North America in the 60s and 70s, and it was largely a group of younger tattooists getting into the occupation who had master's and bachelor's degrees in fine arts. So in a sense, they were changing tattooing, and when I say they were changing, they were trying to do more one-of-a-kind custom designs. They were incorporating ideas from the sort of institutional art world of universities and museums into the occupation of tattooing. And it ultimately did change the aesthetics. They also viewed, this contingent in particular, viewed their professional image, not personally but collectively, as a problem of the occupation. they were afraid that tattooing would get painted in a bad light. So they started holding public events to change tattooing's image and to sort of create a kind of professional code of ethics.
Which brings us to the modern-day tattoo conventions held all over the U.S. Tattoos all over the world had many diverse histories. So what's changed?
Where there have been innovations and changes is like, okay, when people found out about electric, Edison made an electric pen. Well, then a tattooist came along and modified that electric pen to tattoo people. So it made the tattoo process a little bit more efficient than having to poke a needle into the skin by hand. The other ways that I think it's changed a little bit are that the number of colors available has expanded in the last century. And when I say expanded, there were only a handful of colors 100 years ago. Now we have a wide range of them. What's improved in particular about colors is that to get them, people have to use some kind of a pigment. And not all of those colors were necessarily available in pigment, and in pigment that was reasonably safe to insert into skin.
So when looking at equipment and tools, those things have evolved and changed over time. However,
in a sense, while tattooing's changed, it hasn't changed. And I know that sounds like a contradictory or odd statement. At the end of the day, to produce a tattoo involves inserting pigment into the skin.
So there you have it, a brief history of tattoos. Thank you for listening to Ink Inc. with me, Sage. Catch us later for the next episode, Connecting the Dots, where we'll talk about culture and tattoos.